I'll be honest, it seems that every time I go back to FNAF World, I seem to generally dislike the game more and more. Usually I find myself pretty annoyed at the small, irritable problems with the game that aren't too noticeable on a first playthrough. And while I really enjoyed everything that Update 2 offered, it doesn't leave a whole lot of replayability, especially concerning the characters it gives you. But the problem is, I do enjoy the general gameplay here. It's not like I hate this game. I mean, look at it, it's hard to hate. Now, how do I get over this, besides heavily drinking? Caffeine-free, officially licensed Finance Freddy soda drinks? Well, I hop on GameJolt and look for alternatives. Yeah, surprise, surprise, other people also sort of liked FNAF World, making quite a bit of fan games on the subject. And while, trust me, each of these fan games are extremely cool, a majority of the games here are either still at a very early stage in development, or are, FNAF World Simulator. However, browsing around, I think I may have found something to soothe my FNAF World aching soul, being called FNAF World Adventure. Oops, wrong one. Released by Shamir Luminous in late 2019, FNAF World Adventure acts as a sort of sequel to FNAF World. I mean, just look at it. Okay, not for that long. I still have to make a video about it. Jeez. First thing you see upon opening the game is that, no, that's still not it. There is our good friend, Fredbear. Here, he's helping Circus Baby get a little more adjusted to her new home in Fazbear Hills. Also asking for a slight favor involving taking down an old Ferris wheel and dusting fields. Guess Freddy's out of town. So, with the help of Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foxy, who's just a baby here, we're off. Unlike FNAF World's base game, you're able to interact with a lot of the characters here in the overworld, which include pretty much the entire cast from FNAF World, a few from Chipper and Sons, funnily enough, didn't know Dermite King had an accent, and even later on, a couple Pizza Sim characters. Their dialogue here can sometimes be very charming, kind of feeling like something Scott would write himself in this game. Other times it can be a little outdated. The gameplay is your standard 4-player RPG setup, like FNAF World, but with a few major differences. Since the story revolves around our 4 sister location characters, they are permanent players in your party. Yeah, you're stuck with these guys for the entirety of the game. No switching characters here. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, as each character comes with, at the very least, one good attack to choose from. Baby acts as the standard Freddy of the group, coming with Mic Throw. Do I have to? Fine. Pizza Wheel and also Slasher, which instead of being an RNG ability this time is now more of a poison debuff to bosses and commanders, being a new feature here. Every encounter now has a different enemy type in the group's backline that deals a little more damage than the rest. Specific attacks like Slasher here are used to directly damage this enemy type in particular. Going back, Ballora is your standard healer on the team, also coming with gift boxes, which I'll touch on later. Funtime Freddy's attacks are more meant for big groups and bosses. He's actually pretty much useless outside of those, and Funtime Foxy is easily the best one here, having both Neon Wall and Cosmic Song, so, you know, don't let the kid die. After getting a good chunk of XP, you're ready to finally face up against Snow Cone, who's, basically just defending his home. Don't feel great about doing that. Forgetting about the Ferris wheel entirely, it's literally never mentioned again, our group runs into Ennard. Now, you may be thinking, how is this possible? Don't worry about the implications. Ennard! He's just here to say hello, but is acting a bit strangely, at least according to Funtime Freddy. Before moving on, I'd like to set the groundwork for the story a little, as it'll be a bit confusing without it. For a good chunk of their lives, Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and yes, even Ennard had all worked as freak show attractions at Browboy's Pinwheel Circus. However, due to their terrible treatment there, they all decided to basically make a run for it. Although, somehow during this, Ennard was severely damaged, and as a result, grew more of an outcast from the rest of the group, just sort of wandering around now. After making it to Dark Oak Forest, Fredbear warns that Browboy is back in town, specifically looking to enact a little dash of revenge on our main group by stationing his circus right next to the woods. So we're tasked with clearing this newfound invasion of ball boys and taking Browboy and his circus down for good. This all leading to a lot of different fights, of course. Now, I'll be honest, my main gripe with this game, you probably guessed it, comes with the lack of attack variety. Since each animatronic here usually has one extremely useless move and 2 really good ones, except for Funtime Freddy, actually, he really sucks. Really bad, by the way. Fights can easily turn into a cycle of using the exact same abilities over and over and over and over again. It's kind of like when in FNAF World you have the really OP characters that you never want to swap out. It just becomes a cycle of repeated moves for every single fight. And that's not even mentioning the severe lack of bites here. This is literally all you get. Good news is, just like FNAF World, most encounters can be easily skipped by holding R. There's no weird time restraint here either. It basically immediately skips the fight. And if you're really feeling it, you can also initiate fights whenever you want by simply pressing F. It's actually a really neat feature here. After taking down Brown Boy and a few of his lackeys, the story begins to shift a little. And by a little, I mean a lot. Fredbear warns us that the flip side is starting to physically leak into our world, causing different anomalies like XOR here, who speaks in binary. Ugh, this is gonna kill me. It says, "You will die, I am death, no escape, God arrives, suffer." Really generic, scary stuff. Kinda disappointed, honestly. Anyway, your whole goal now is trying to reach the creator of the island. Take a wild guess who that is, before the world becomes completely infested. From this point on, a lot of the game's focus is put on defeating bosses in certain regions of the map, like Monster Man here. Oh my god. We also run into Ennard again, but his strange behavior continues. I actually don't understand what his deal is here. He just seems to randomly want to hurt these people now.
I don't understand. I thought I did everything right. You won't die.
But my party does not accept defeat that easily. Oh, well, damn, why does this gear rat have so much health? There! That easily. Yeah. After that, we go through a short little maze, defeat Security Owl and a few special enemies, and we're here. Finally, facing against the true villain of the story, Scott Cawthon himself. Oh, when did this game come out again? Whoa, oh my god, he's ripped. This boss fight is actually not that tough at all, at least compared to FNAF World. He's got 2 stages, regularly deals about 49 damage ticks every now and then. It's kinda anticlimactic. And, well, that's the game. Now, I built this up to be kind of a big deal. It doesn't really sound a whole lot like something that would be considered my favorite FNAF World fan game, right? Well, that's because I think the game's second update is where it truly shines. Literally less than a month after the game's release, Update 2 for the game dropped, bringing bug fixes, visual changes, all the usual stuff, but also, more surprisingly, came with what's essentially DLC for the game. This time, after meeting Fredbear in the astral plane, being the point between the flipside and overworld, we cut to 3 years after the events of the main game. The dialogue reflects this very well. Even Funtime Foxy's all grown up now. However, more importantly, a new character has come to visit the island, being Malhair. And he's quite the prankster, hiding in a bunch of different spots around the map, maybe or maybe not intentionally throwing bosses our way, killing Brow Boy. Yeah, he's evil, who would have guessed.
But at least I'll make for a fat scarecrow.
And while the game's combat really hasn't changed in any substantial way, the bosses the game throws at you now are much more difficult this time around. So much so that you'll probably want these guys. The mini arenas kind of act as Freddles from the base game, also healing the party in the process, and the Biddy Bamps mimic any of Baby's moves, both being very helpful. Also pretty expensive. Anyway, Malhair, oh, never mind. Jeremy reveals himself to be a distant friend of theirs, blaming them for leaving him behind during their escape attempt from the circus. That's right, Jeremy here seems to have been another one of the freak show attractions in their group, meeting his demise and a giant fire spurring from their outbreak. With his new mystical powers that can pretty much do anything, he's hellbent on getting revenge, sending lots of different bosses and also these guys after us. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that Chipper becomes a robot and ends up killing Fredbear here. To emotionally toy with the gang a little more, Jeremy resurrects Ennard and forcibly influences him to have another go at a boss fight. Oh yeah, round 2, baby. Let's get it. It's actually not that bad. But this ends up mentally destroying Baby, or Elizabeth, at least he calls her that sometimes, vowing to try and ultimately save Jeremy. This leads us to Shadow Valley, our last location here. But before we actually get there, well, we need to grind a bit. The totally legit way of grinding. Okay, boom, here we are, face to face with Jeremy. Face to face with Jeremy. He's definitely the hardest boss here, dealing massive amounts of damage and having a good chunk of health to suit. If it weren't for gift boxes, it kind of feels like I'm cheating. And once defeated, Jeremy reveals in a really cool fully voiced cutscene that his ultimate plan was simply to cause a bit of chaos.
I got exactly what I wanted. I made you lose control. I pulled your strings. I made everyone know who you and your stupid friends really are.
We didn't mean to.
Me to what? You saved yourselves, but not me. I burned in that fire, called for help, but nobody came. You ruined my life, so I ruined yours.
Despite all this, Baby is still willing to try and get him some help, but he, takes it differently. Little confused? Don't worry, I was too. The version of the game I was playing was subject to a few rewrites from certain pieces of dialogue, some coming from the base game and some coming from Update 2. However, besides a few thankful changes, the story seems to actually be a little more convoluted this time, also not really addressing any of the important questions, like why are Baby and Ballora referred to as Elizabeth and Emily, at least in this universe? What was Ennard's whole deal? He wasn't all that upset that his friends killed him. Where was Freddy this entire time? He supposedly died. Oh, wait, I actually can't answer that one. This game also features 2 sub-games in the extras menu, being Foxy Fighters and Freddy in Space. You've probably heard of them. They're both not too different from their original minigames in FNAF World, at least mechanically. Foxy Fighters now has 4 levels you can complete, with spiffy new upgrades that range from crazy broken to barely functional. At the end of each level, you face up against boss fights like Brow Boy, the final boss and Fighter Mage Bard, an animatronic named Kate, and a final rematch against Souldozer. Guess it really wasn't the last time we'd see of him. Freddy in Space here does a good job of filling in for where Freddy's been this whole time. He's been in space, defending the cosmos from a world-ending being that's been haunting his dreams. To its core, it's Freddy in space. Well, at least to whoever this guy is in space. Collect hidden cupcakes to get upgrades, blast away any robotic pests, avoid stray laser beams, Freddy, space, yeah. There's a few bosses here and there, checkpoints, which are very nice admittedly, and finally an encounter with the hellish abomination known as it's a Pulsar from the Desolate Hope. The whole thing's pretty easy to complete thanks to the checkpoints, ending with the presumed death of Freddy Fazbear. I mean, he did have a gravestone at the end. Is he really dead? Well, no. That's because released in early 2020, FNAF World Edge of Time is a direct sequel to FNAF World Adventure. Well, less on the direct part. It takes place around 8 years after the events of its predecessor. This time, you play as Freddy, the presumed dead space-traveling hero who was rescued following his gun down with Pulsar by, Wendy. That Wendy. Supposedly, some sort of guide named The Watcher led our past group of fun times to spread a zombie-like virus throughout the island, with the only way to revert these changes being through, time travel, of course. So, it's up to Freddy, Wendy, Ballora, and, Candy, he's just kinda here, to return this desolate wasteland to its old cheery self by finding 5 of the ancient clocks before Malhair does. Yeah, he's, back, even though he died. Twice, really. The gameplay remains very similar, actually, to FNAF World Adventure, but obviously our party has changed a bit. For the better. This time, characters here are thankfully given more variety in their attacks, not just conform to a certain type. Freddy here's got a pretty useful Mega Charge, when it wants to work. Actually is the one on the team with the best healing ability, at least you'll be using it the most, and tends to scratch large bundles of enemies. Wendy is more ranged for group attacks and debuffs, with a really cool animation to suit. Candy is given a helpful shield, until you realize how much it actually blocks. And Ballora has a variety of different moves, ranging from passive healing, to boss deflects, to orbital lightning strikes. Like I said before, the culprit bugging our main cast again is Malhair, or Jeremy, or whatever, and this time he's brought a bunch of new obstacles in our path, including the Pizza Sim gang, with some fun cutscenes to go with them.
Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a train to catch!
Some insane looking twisted animatronics, and even new versions of older characters. Speaking of which, Fredbear returns, looking just a little more green this time. Now given the title of Dreadbear, obviously, he's keen on following Malhair's orders to the end. He's also Freddy's foster father. Actually, Freddy here goes through a bit of a character arc in this story. Starting as an overly eager lone wolf type of hero, but thanks to Purple Guy's guidance near the midpoint of the game, slowly realizes he's pushing away people just like his father Fredbear did. I'd even say the characterization here is definitely one of this game's strong suits. Ballora acts more angsty, at least that's what she's called many times in the game, just wanting to get her past family back. Wendy is more rational and grounded, and Candy, well, I'll be honest, doesn't have a lot of input most of the time. He's kinda like the group's straight man. But it all combines to give a good balance to the dynamic for the plot moving forward. At least for what's left. Yeah, I may have forgotten to mention this little important detail that the game was completely cancelled and left in a pretty unfinished state. On its release, blatantly stated in the game's description, Shamir simply wanted to work on newer, more refreshing projects, not generally feeling a lot of enjoyment from the development of this one. With this, I bet a lot of the gripes I have with this game stem from that. Like its predecessor, coming with a permanent roster means this charade can unfortunately get pretty old pretty fast. The only real change up here to combat is with bites, but they're all kind of as basic as you'd expect, with one big issue that I'll mention later. The main problem with a lot of these bosses, however, boils down to how grinding works in this game. Now, don't get me wrong, the steady progression of difficulty feels very on point for a game like this, especially compared to Adventure, and XP does in fact make your party significantly stronger. However, these little gem thingies you get after defeating bosses are only obtained after defeating bosses, and you don't get a whole lot of them at the start. Like with Dreadbear, for example, I needed a few more gems to get a second upgrade for a med pack, which definitely would have helped for that fight. But again, since they're only obtained through defeating these bosses, I was stuck initiating battles over and over until I could finally defeat them through garnered XP alone, which just wasn't that fun. Now, like I said, this seems to be solely due to the game's unfinished state, as an NPC at the start says you can obtain gems through the completion of side quests, but there aren't any. The only extra activity here to gain gems is through defeating a few secret bosses scattered about, but that doesn't really feel like an intended game mechanic. They're also pretty hard to find, and especially beat. After our reluctant team finishes off Scrap Baby, or the infected Elizabeth, they finally acquire the 5th clock. Well, until Malheur comes, scoops it up, and quickly runs off, or floats off, I guess. Trying to catch up, we're prompted to visit the flip side in a small, confusing maze of sorts. These enemies are really hard, but eventually, and I mean eventually, you'll find them at the end of it. Oh, hold on. Oh, yeah, this last stretch of the game comes extremely unfinished, with 4 differently paced smaller boss battles with platformer-like gameplay to suit. A bit anticlimactic, once again, especially since the very last boss against Malheur doesn't even have any attacks, but nevertheless, that's FNAF World Edge of Time. In all honesty, it's such a shame to see it go unfinished. Everything, from the story beats to the characters, even the general gameplay, served as a step up, at least for me, from FNAF World Adventure. But, well, what if I told you that this actually isn't all there is just yet? Released just a few months after Edge of Time, Shamir uploaded a mysterious game literally titled Blank. And I don't think it's talking about this guy. Here, we're tasked by somebody with making it to a place called Junior's to just grab something to eat real quick. First thing is, the tone of this game is much different from the cheery green hills we're used to. The menu screen makes this quite apparent. The game actually shares a bit of resemblance to FNAF World's original release, but I'd say more leans towards a FNAF 3 minigame style, even having a faint music box like Lullaby playing in the background. Scattered around the map is a hidden key that, when collected, seems to do nothing. Until you realize that once you actually make it to Junior's in the top left corner of the map, you're booted all the way back to the start. This will continue about 4 more times. Gather a key, make it to Junior's, and then get taken back to the beginning. And I'll just cut to the chase, there's 4 possible endings here, all depending on how many keys you've collected. The first ending is achieved after actually collecting none of the keys and making it to a strange looking cupcake in the upper left corner of the map. Interacting with it reveals a, whoa, very creepy looking man. Here, whoever this is, exchanges a bit of dialogue with some sort of doctor, talking about Elizabeth, who supposedly wandered off at a birthday party and was found badly injured. However, something tells me that these tests they're proposing aren't gonna have the best outcome. Going back, if the player were to only collect 2 keys and make their way to a small pond in the top left corner of the map, it reveals a short cutscene of Baby's inner monologue before eventually dying in Edge of Time. This shows us that her body went on a killing spree in autopilot due to the infection. At least she definitely killed both Funtime Freddy and Foxy. It's a good cutscene that definitely helps clarify a few things and also reinforces another later ending here. If the player were to play the game normally by collecting every key and then progressing on to Junior's, they'll find blood trails and ghost children scattered around the map with the creepy sound effects to suit. Trekking on to our last stop, you'll notice a purple thing quickly running off, leaving a dead dog in the style of the one from Midnight Motorist in the middle of the forest. Collecting the last key here reveals, well, I'll just let it play. Afterward, we're prompted with a game over screen and some dialogue, presumably from Malheur questioning Elizabeth's ability to discern this as real or make-believe, being told to just smile. What plays next is Elizabeth, now under the virus's full control, in the same wasteland we saw at the beginning of Edge of Time. If the player collects every single key except the very last one and goes back to the original cupcake from the first ending, they'll be prompted with, and I'm not kidding, the complete version of Edge of Time's final boss and ending. It cuts straight to our encounter with Malheur, probably the moment we find him in the flip side, but hold on, things look a little different, especially our cast here. Every character, except Freddy, has had some sort of visual change, with both Wendy and Candy practically being entirely different characters. Not that it matters much though, since when Malheur transforms into, well, himself with antlers and wings, we have to get the help of Anim Dude. Yeah, he didn't die in the original game, I guess. He was just napping the whole time. The actual fight takes place in space, with Freddy sitting atop a flying Anim Dude shooting small blue pellets at a winged Jeremy. He periodically shoots large orbs at us while we have to dodge these glitchy objects, purple wasp robot thingies, and giant purple dreadbear heads. It can take a while and be a bit challenging if you're not careful, but once you've shot him long enough, he goes down. Afterwards, a small cutscene plays with both Freddy and Jeremy in a deep dark void. Despite everything, Freddy's ready to forgive him, reaching out his hand to help him get up. And while he may have had a change of heart in the end, Jeremy fades away. When Freddy rejoins the gang, except for the endoskeleton strangely, they all ponder about what's gonna happen next, as Anim Dude is surely going to bring everyone to a new, better world. However, they just settle on taking it easy for now, while we cut to Anim Dude granting this new world to the hands of someone named Lyra. And that's FNAF World Edge of Time, or at least the originally planned ending for the game. This cutscene also promises a FNAF World Adventure 3 release in 2021, but that didn't happen obviously. What happened instead was, about 4 whole years after the first release of the original game, Shamir announced that their next project, a complete remake of FNAF World Adventure, was actually cancelled. But at least there's a playable build, I guess. Named FNAF World Adventure DX. Funny. The game itself acted pretty much the same. It is a remake after all, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that practically every single problem I had with FNAF World Adventure's gameplay is literally fixed here. Now, instead of characters being tied to a certain role in the group, each member has, at the very least, an attack ability and some sort of healing ability. With this, a lot more focus was put on balancing the attacks, meaning that abilities like Mic Throw and Bite are actually pretty good here. Getting rid of gift boxes also makes this game so much more interesting, and since each member can pretty much survive on their own, it makes battles, especially against bosses, feel so much more fresh and exciting. The overworld has also been completely rehauled, featuring new animations and dialogue for every single side character, a few minigames, an actual shop for both Lolbit and Mendo, hey, I don't have to swim anymore, a section to view the stats of your party, and can I just mention how perfectly they were able to capture FNAF World's effects and visuals during fights? I mean, from a distance, this practically looks like a third update to the game. However, being in an unfinished state, this game is obviously missing a few textures, mainly for bosses, and is sadly lacking any semblance of a story, something I think could have been vastly improved upon here. But overall, through the game's bosses and mission objectives, there is a fully playable game here, even down to the final boss. Due to feelings of making the game a bit overstuffed, doubts about remakes in general, and just simply wanting to do other things, Shamir decided to ultimately can the project, releasing this early build as a sort of send-off for the series. So, honestly, this has to be the most in-depth FNAF World fan game series, like, ever made. And while sure, it's got a few problems, it's an incredibly fun ride, and I think perfectly captures a lot of the whimsy that the original FNAF World had in its witty dialogue and characterization. To the point where I'd confidently say that this is my favorite FNAF World fan game series. Out of the 2 that probably exist. Right now, Shamir seems to be working on more FNAF fan projects and even the development of a big FNAF World related fan game planned for the future. But it truly seems that the FNAF World Adventure series has most likely been fully wrapped up. Which, looking at it, going back to my original problem, only really spared me a few days of enjoyment. Where am I supposed to look to now? FNAF World Adventure 2? How do I keep getting these mixed up?